Get that filthy black woman out of my house! I can smell her from here. We don't hire your kind.
Evelyn held her suitcase with both hands.
I was told to start today, ma'am. Ma'am.
Gloria laughed.
Look at you. Dirty uniform, cheap shoes. You're not a maid, you're a stray.
A guard smirked. Another pulled out his phone, recording. Evelyn lowered her eyes.
I just need the work. You need to leave. Before the dog gets you. He hates strangers. Especially ones that look like you.
Behind a steel gate, Titan snarled. 130 pounds of fury that had sent 3 men to the hospital. But what no one in that mansion could imagine was that in less than an hour, that dog would be lying at this woman's feet. Gloria handed Evelyn a bucket and a wire brush before she'd even set her suitcase down. Kennel duty. Scrub the floors, clean the drainage grates, hose down the yard. Don't go near the cage. Evelyn took the bucket without a word. The kennel building sat behind the main house, a concrete block with fluorescent lights and the smell of bleach that couldn't quite cover the smell of fear. 3 enclosures lined the far wall. 2 were empty. The third held Titan. The staff had stories. Marco, a driver, told her during lunch that Titan had sent 3 people to the hospital in 6 months. A professional trainer had lasted 2 sessions before the dog bit through his reinforced glove and cracked a bone in his hand. The trainer filed a lawsuit. Vincent settled it with a phone call. He's not a pet, Marco said. He's a liability they feed. Gloria added her own warning later that afternoon, standing in the doorway of the laundry room with her arms crossed. The last girl who got curious about that dog spent 4 days in surgical recovery. You clean the floor. You fill the water bowl through the slot. You don't open the gate. You don't talk to it. You don't look at it. Evelyn nodded. But that evening, after the house had quieted and the security team had shifted to the perimeter, Evelyn walked back to the kennel alone. She carried nothing. No treats, no tools, no leash. She pulled a plastic chair 6 feet from Titan's enclosure and sat down. Titan lunged at the bars. The impact shook the frame. His bark echoed off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't speak. She turned the chair slightly so her back was angled toward the cage, not fully turned away, but enough to remove the direct stare. She breathed slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She let her hands rest open on her knees. Titan barked for 11 minutes straight. Then he paced. Then he sat in the far corner, watching her with his head low and his ears flat. Evelyn stayed for another 20 minutes. Then she stood, pushed the chair back to the wall, and left without looking at him. She did the same thing the next night, and the night after that. On the 3rd night, Titan didn't bark. He lay down near the bars, his massive head resting on his front paws, his eyes tracking her breathing. When Evelyn finally stood to leave, the dog let out a low whine. Not a growl, not a warning. Something closer to a question. No one saw this, but someone was watching. Nathan Hargrove was 10 years old and had not spoken a full sentence to anyone in the house for 3 months. Not since his mother had left, packed a bag in the middle of the night, and vanished into a car that idled at the east gate. Vincent never explained. Nathan never asked. He simply stopped talking. He spent his evenings in the 2nd-floor hallway that overlooked the rear courtyard. From there, through a narrow window, he could see the kennel building's open yard. He had watched Evelyn sit with Titan 3 nights in a row. He had seen what no one else had. The moment the dog stopped barking. The moment something shifted. Nathan pressed his forehead against the glass and watched Evelyn walk back toward the house. His breath fogged the window. He didn't wipe it away. The next morning, Gloria found something unusual on the security feed and brought it to Vincent. She replayed the footage on the monitor in his office. Evelyn, sitting motionless near Titan's cage, the dog gradually settling. "She's either brave or mentally unwell," Gloria said. Vincent watched the footage twice. He leaned closer to the screen when Titan lay down. He rewound it, played it again. In 2 years of owning that dog, through 6 trainers, 4 veterinary behaviorists, a shock collar program, and a sedation regimen, he had never seen Titan voluntarily lie down in the presence of another human being. "Leave her alone," Vincent said. "Let her do whatever she's doing." Gloria opened her mouth to object, then closed it. She'd worked for Vincent Hargrove for 9 years. She knew when a conversation was over. What neither of them knew, what Evelyn had told no one, was that 6 years ago, she had been Dr. Evelyn Carter, board-certified veterinary behaviorist. She had run a clinic in Asheville, North Carolina, specializing in aggressive and traumatized dogs that shelters had marked for euthanasia. Her success rate was remarkable. Dogs that had bitten handlers, dogs that had been fought, dogs that flinched at every shadow. She rebuilt them, patiently, silently, the same way she was rebuilding Titan now. The clinic burned down on a Tuesday in March. Electrical fire, the report said. Insurance denied the claim. Irregularities in the policy, they told her. Her husband, James, had gone back inside to retrieve their case files. He didn't come out. After that, Evelyn stopped being a doctor. She stopped being anything that required hope. She cleaned houses. She scrubbed floors. She disappeared into work that asked nothing of her mind and everything of her hands, until she knelt beside a dog that reminded her of every broken creature she had ever healed. And something inside her, something she thought the fire had killed, began to breathe again. On the 4th night, Evelyn sat in the kennel yard with the gate open for the first time. Titan walked out slowly, circled her twice, and lay down with his head touching her knee. From the 2nd floor window, Nathan watched. And for the first time in 3 months, he smiled. Vincent summoned Evelyn to his office on the 5th morning. The room smelled of espresso and old leather. A wall of monitors behind his desk showed live feeds from every corner of the estate, including the kennel. He didn't offer her a seat. "What are you doing with my dog?" Evelyn stood with her hands folded in front of her. "I'm not doing anything to him. I'm letting him feel safe." Vincent leaned forward. "I didn't hire you to feel. I hired you to clean. And I've had 6 trainers, real trainers, people with degrees and equipment, try to fix that dog. Every one of them failed." "They didn't fail because they lacked equipment," Evelyn said. "They failed because they treated fear like disobedience." The room went quiet. Vincent studied her face the way he studied people across negotiation tables, looking for the bluff, the angle, the play. "I want him operational," Vincent said. "Guard-trained, obedient on command, aggressive when I need him aggressive." "Then you don't want a trained dog," Evelyn said. "You want a weapon. And that's exactly what broke him in the first place." Gloria, standing near the door, sucked in a breath. No one spoke to Vincent Hargrove like that. Not his lawyers, not his lieutenants, certainly not a housekeeper who'd been on staff for 5 days. Vincent's jaw tightened. "You're forgetting who you work for." "I'm not forgetting anything," Evelyn said. "But you should know, that dog isn't aggressive because he's strong. He's aggressive because he's terrified. Every shock collar, every raised hand, every time someone cornered him and forced compliance. It didn't teach him obedience. It taught him that every human being is a threat." She paused, let the words settle. "Except me, because I'm the first person who sat with him and asked for nothing." Vincent stood up from his desk and walked to the window overlooking the kennel yard. Titan was lying in a patch of sun, something the staff hadn't seen him do in months. His eyes were half closed. His body was loose. "Prove it," Vincent said without turning around. "Prove you're not just some maid who got lucky with a dog." "Call your veterinarian," Evelyn said. Dr. Samuel Whitfield arrived that afternoon. He was a tall man with silver temples and 26 years of large breed veterinary experience. Vincent had hired him 3 times before to evaluate Titan. Each time, the assessment was the same: chronically elevated cortisol, hyperactive stress response, recommendation for pharmaceutical sedation, or surrender to a specialist containment facility. Evelyn walked him through the kennel. She described Titan's behavior patterns without a single note: the displacement licking when approached from the left, the full-body freeze response triggered by metallic sounds, the whale eye that preceded every bite incident. She mapped his fear cascade with clinical precision: trigger, escalation window, threshold, and the exact point where flight converted to fight. He's not dominant aggressive, Evelyn told Whitfield. He's fear reactive, with a compressed latency period. Classic profile for an animal subjected to aversive conditioning during the critical socialization window, probably between 8 and 14 weeks. Whitfield stared at her. He pulled out his tablet and scrolled through Titan's medical file. The dates matched. The behavioral markers matched. He had missed half of it across 3 evaluations. Then came the examination. In every previous visit, Titan had required a muzzle, a catch pole, and chemical sedation just for a basic physical. This time, Evelyn stood 3 feet away with her hand extended palm down. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Titan kept his eyes locked on her face while Whitfield palpated his abdomen, checked his joints, and examined his teeth. No muzzle, no restraint, no sedation. The dog's pulse stayed steady the entire time. When it was over, Whitfield turned to Vincent. Everything she described is clinically accurate: the cortisol patterns, the fear cascade model, the trauma timeline. I missed half of this in 3 evaluations with full lab panels. Whoever trained this woman knew exactly what they were doing. I trained myself, Evelyn said quietly. Whitfield looked at her for a long moment. You're not a housekeeper. I am now. The silence that followed filled the room like smoke. Gloria stared at the floor. Vincent stared at Evelyn. Whitfield closed his tablet and said nothing more. Fine, Vincent said. You work with the dog, but on my terms. No, Evelyn said. On mine. She held up 3 fingers. 1. No one hits, shocks, chains, or corners Titan again. Not your men, not your trainers, not you. If I find out anyone has used force on that dog, I stop immediately and I walk out that gate. 2. Your son Nathan participates in the rehabilitation. He needs this as much as the dog does. Titan already responds to him. I've watched your son sit at that window every night. He's drawn to the dog because they share the same wound. They both stopped trusting people. Vincent's expression shifted. Not anger this time, but something rawer and less defended. She had touched the one thing he couldn't control with money or intimidation: his son's silence. 3. The staff treats me as what I am, the specialist rehabilitating your dog, not the help, not the maid who got lucky. If I'm going to rebuild this animal's trust in human beings, I need to be treated like one myself. Gloria's eyes dropped to the floor. Vincent didn't speak for a long time. He looked at the monitor showing Titan resting in the yard, then at the feed showing Nathan sitting by his bedroom window, forehead pressed to the glass, staring at nothing. And if I say no, then fire me, Evelyn said. But you'll lose the only person your dog trusts, and maybe the only chance your son has to start trusting someone again too. From the hallway, through a door left slightly open, Nathan had been listening. He pressed both hands flat against the wall and whispered, the first voluntary words he'd spoken in 3 months. Please don't let her leave, Dad. Vincent heard it. Everyone in the room heard it. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples touched every wall. Fine, Vincent said. His voice was rough and low. Your terms. That night, Evelyn sat in the kennel yard under a single floodlight. She pulled strips of soft leather from her bag, scraps she'd collected from the estate's tack room over the past week, and began braiding. Strand over strand, tight and even, her fingers working from a memory older than grief. Titan lay beside her, his enormous head resting on her thigh, his breathing slow and deep. She held up the finished leash. Simple. Warm brown leather, supple from the oils in her hands, stitched at the loop with careful thread. She clipped it to Titan's collar and let it rest on the ground between them. No tension. No pull. "This isn't a chain," she whispered. "This is a promise." Titan's tail moved once. Slow. Deliberate. The first wag anyone on that estate had ever seen from him. The rehabilitation began the next morning at dawn. Evelyn set up a routine, precise, patient, built on years of work she thought she'd buried. Every session started the same way. She walked into the kennel yard, sat on the ground, and waited. No commands, no pressure. She let Titan come to her on his own terms. The first week focused on desensitization. Evelyn identified Titan's 3 primary triggers: metallic sounds, sudden hand movements, and direct eye contact from strangers. She addressed each one separately. For the metallic trigger, she placed a set of keys on the ground 10 feet from Titan while he ate. Each day, she moved them 1 foot closer. By day 5, the keys sat next to his bowl. He ate without flinching. On day 6, she jingled them softly while he chewed. His ears flicked, but his body stayed loose. For hand movements, she enlisted Marco. "Walk past the yard, wave at me, don't look at the dog." Marco waved. Titan tensed, but held his position. By the end of the week, 3 staff members could pass the yard with normal gestures, and Titan wouldn't rise from his spot. "Good," Evelyn whispered. Not to praise him, Titan didn't need words. She said it for herself. Because every small victory reminded her that she still knew how to do this. Nathan joined the sessions on the 2nd week. Evelyn had cleared it with Vincent, who watched from the monitors with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. The boy appeared at the kennel gate, carrying a paperback book, and said nothing. "You don't have to talk," Evelyn told him. "Just sit. Read your book out loud if you want." He needs to learn that human voices aren't always giving orders. Nathan sat cross-legged on the concrete, opened his book, and began to read. His voice was small and rusty from disuse. He stumbled over words, but he kept going. Titan watched him for a while. Then the dog stood, walked over, and lay down with his back pressed against Nathan's leg. The boy's hand trembled. He reached down and touched the fur along Titan's spine. The first time he had touched another living thing with tenderness in months. Evelyn turned away, so neither of them would see her eyes. The sessions grew longer. Nathan came every afternoon after his tutor left. He read to Titan, adventure stories mostly, books about boys who sailed ships and climbed mountains. Titan would lie beside him, sometimes with his head in Nathan's lap, sometimes with one paw draped over the boy's ankle, as though anchoring him to the spot. Evelyn introduced the braided leash during the 3rd week. She clipped it to Titan's collar and handed the other end to Nathan. "Hold it loose," she said. "A leash should feel like a handshake, not a fist." Nathan repeated the words under his breath. He held the leather strap the way Evelyn showed him. Relaxed fingers, slack line, no tension. They walked together through the garden for the first time. Titan didn't pull. He walked at Nathan's pace, matching the boy step for step, his shoulder brushing Nathan's hip. Vincent watched from the terrace. He had come outside, something he rarely did during daylight. He stood with his hands in his pockets and said nothing, but his eyes followed his son's every step. When Nathan laughed, a sudden bright sound that cracked the silence of the garden like a bird breaking through fog. Vincent's hand went to his mouth. He turned away. Gloria, standing behind him with a tray of coffee, pretended not to notice. By the 4th week, the transformation was visible to everyone on the estate. Titan walked unleashed through the main house. He sat at Nathan's feet during meals. He greeted staff members with a slow tail wag instead of bared teeth. Marco, the driver who had once called him a liability, started bringing him scraps from the kitchen. Vincent began attending the training sessions himself. He stood at the edge of the yard, watching. Evelyn didn't invite him closer. She waited. On a Thursday afternoon, she handed him a treat. Walk toward him, slowly. Don't look at his eyes, look at his chest. Extend your hand below his chin, not above his head. Let him close the distance. Vincent Hargrove, a man who had never knelt before anyone, who ran his empire from a position of absolute control, got down on one knee in the grass. He extended his hand the way Evelyn had shown him, palm down, fingers loose. Titan approached, sniffed his knuckles, pressed his nose into Vincent's palm. Vincent's breath caught. His fingers curled gently around the dog's muzzle. Titan didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch, heavy, warm, trusting. "He's never done that with me," Vincent said. His voice was thick. "He didn't trust you before," Evelyn said. "You were the loudest voice in his world. Loud meant danger. And now? Now you're quiet." That's all he ever needed. Vincent stayed on his knee for a long time. When he finally stood, his eyes were red. He didn't explain. No one asked him to. That evening, Evelyn shared a piece of her past. She sat with Nathan on the kennel steps while Titan dozed in the yard. The boy had asked her, in halting, careful words, how she knew so much about dogs. "I used to help dogs like Titan," she said. "Dogs that had been hurt. Dogs that had been used for fighting or locked in cages or trained with pain. Everyone said they were too broken to save." Were they? Not one. She looked at Titan. "I had a dog once, a pit bull named Birch. He'd been used in a fighting ring for 3 years. When I got him, he couldn't be in the same room as a human without shaking. Took me 14 months, but he became a therapy dog, worked at a children's hospital. Kids who wouldn't talk to doctors would sit on the floor with Birch and tell him everything." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Like me and Titan." Evelyn smiled. "Exactly like you and Titan." "What happened to Birch?" "He lived to be 12, died in his sleep on the couch at my clinic." She paused. "The clinic isn't there anymore. It burned down." Nathan didn't ask more. He reached over and put his hand on Evelyn's arm, a gesture so small and so deliberate that it held the weight of every word he hadn't spoken in 3 months. Gloria appeared at the kitchen door. She stood there for a moment, watching the boy, the woman, and the dog in the fading light. Then she walked over, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "I judged you wrong," Gloria said quietly, handing one to Evelyn. "From the moment you walked in, I was wrong." Evelyn took the mug. "You were protecting the house you know." "I was protecting my pride," Gloria said. "That's not the same thing." They sat together in silence as the yard lights clicked on and the evening settled around them like a blanket. But that night, something else settled too. A dark sedan idled on the road outside the estate's east wall. The driver made a phone call. "The dog's calm now. Walks around without a leash. No muzzle. The woman fixed it." On the other end of the line, Dominic Slade leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Good. That means the compound's weakest point just got a lot weaker." The security camera on the east fence caught a shadow moving along the perimeter at 2 in the morning. Titan, sleeping in Nathan's room for the first time, lifted his head. His ears rotated forward. A low growl built in his chest. Not the wild, fear-driven snarl the staff had known before. This was different. Controlled. Purposeful. A warning. Evelyn, lying awake in her room on the ground floor, heard it through the walls. She sat up in bed and listened. "He's telling us something's wrong," she whispered. To no one. Evelyn found the meat at 6 in the morning. It was pressed against the base of the east fence, 3 chunks of raw beef, dark and wet, arranged in a deliberate line. She crouched beside them and held one close to her face. The smell hit her immediately. Underneath the iron tang of raw flesh, something chemical. Sharp. Bitter. Wrong. She didn't touch it with her bare hands. She wrapped the pieces in a plastic bag from the kennel supply room and brought them straight to Vincent's office. "Someone tried to poison your dog last night." Vincent took the bag. He opened it, smelled it, and his face went still. The kind of still that preceded the worst decisions he'd ever made. "Who?" "I don't know," Evelyn said. "But whoever did it knows the compound layout. They knew where Titan sleeps, where the fence cameras have blind spots, and what kind of food he eats. This wasn't random." Vincent made 3 phone calls in 15 minutes. The first was to his head of security. The second was to a forensic contact who could test the meat. The third was to a name Evelyn didn't recognize. The test results came back that afternoon. Rodificum, a slow-acting anticoagulant rodenticide, lethal within 48 hours. If Titan had eaten even 1 piece, he would have bled internally until his organs failed. Vincent sat behind his desk and stared at the wall. "Slade," he said. Dominic Slade had been Vincent's most trusted lieutenant for 11 years before a territory dispute split them apart. Slade had built his own operation on the south side, smaller, hungrier, more reckless. He'd been probing Vincent's defenses for months, testing fences, bribing low-level staff, running surveillance on delivery schedules. The poisoning wasn't just an attack on Titan. It was a message. Your house is not as strong as you think. 2 days later, the message escalated. Nathan didn't come home from school. His tutor called at 4:15. The driver called at 4:20. By 4:30, Vincent's security team had locked down the estate and confirmed what everyone already feared. Nathan's school bag was found on the sidewalk outside the academy's east gate. His phone was inside, screen cracked against the pavement. No sign of the boy. At 5 o'clock, Vincent's personal phone rang. Dominic Slade's voice was calm and unhurried. "I have your son. He's comfortable. For now." Vincent gripped the phone so hard the case cracked beneath his fingers. "What do you want?" "The South Corridor routes, the offshore accounts, all 6. And the dog." "The dog?" "Your woman fixed him, made him obedient, calm, focused. That makes him more valuable than any guard you've got. Send the dog, send the account numbers, and I'll send the boy home with all his fingers." The line went dead. Vincent stood in his office, surrounded by 6 men who carried guns and answered to his name, and not one of them had a workable plan. His security chief suggested a raid on Slade's known properties, but Slade rotated locations every 72 hours. His lawyer suggested calling federal contacts, but federal meant questions Vincent couldn't afford to answer. Both options took time. Nathan didn't have time. Evelyn appeared in the doorway. She had heard everything through the intercom Gloria had left open in the kitchen. "I can find him," she said. Every head in the room turned. "Titan can find him. I've been training him on scent work for 3 weeks as part of his rehabilitation. It builds focus, confidence, and trust. I used Nathan's clothing, his book, his pillow. Titan knows Nathan's scent better than any tracking device you own." Vincent shook his head. "You're a maid." "I'm the person your dog trusts," Evelyn said. "And right now, that dog is the only asset on this estate that can track your son in real time. Not your cameras, not your men, not your guns. Your dog." The security chief laughed, a short, sharp sound. Evelyn didn't look at him. "Slade is running a fear play," she continued. "He won't hurt Nathan, yet. A dead hostage has no leverage. He needs your son alive and scared so you'll hand over the accounts. That gives us a window. But every hour you waste arguing, that window gets smaller." Vincent looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the monitor showing Titan pacing in Nathan's empty room, nose pressed to the floor, whining at the boy's pillow. "Do it," he said. They moved at nightfall. Evelyn, Vincent, 2 armed guards, and Titan. Evelyn held the braided leash in her left hand. She had pressed one of Nathan's worn shirts against Titan's nose before they left the estate. The dog had inhaled it, deep, focused, locked in. His ears came forward, his body dropped low. He pulled toward the east gate with a purpose the guards had never seen in any animal. They drove to the warehouse district on the south side, a grid of corrugated steel buildings, dead loading docks, and broken chain-link fences that Slade's operation used as rotating safe houses. Rain had started. The streets were empty. Water pooled in cracked asphalt and reflected the sick orange glow of sodium lights overhead. Evelyn unclipped Titan's leash at the edge of the first block. "Find him," she whispered. Titan moved like smoke through the rain. No barking, no hesitation. He worked the ground in wide arcs at first, nose sweeping left to right, filtering 1,000 scents through the downpour. Then he narrowed. His head came up. He locked onto a line and followed it. Between 2 buildings, across a flooded lot where the water reached his chest, past a row of rusted dumpsters, and toward a loading dock with a bent roll-up door. He stopped, sat, looked back at Evelyn. His tail was still. His breathing was steady. His eyes said one thing: "Here." "He's here," Evelyn said. The guards breached the door. Inside, a single room, concrete floor, 1 bare bulb swinging from a wire overhead. Nathan sat tied to a metal folding chair. A strip of silver duct tape covered his mouth. His wrists were bound behind him with zip ties. His eyes were wide and wet and terrified. But he was alive. He was whole. Titan reached him first. The dog pressed his entire body against the boy's legs, whining, licking Nathan's bound hands, his chin, his tear-streaked cheeks. Nathan's muffled sobs broke through the tape. Evelyn cut the zip ties with a utility knife from her pocket and peeled the tape gently from his mouth. The first word Nathan said was not "Dad," it was not "help," it was "Titan." He buried his face in the dog's neck and held on with both arms shaking. Behind them, a side door scraped open. Dominic Slade stepped through holding a pistol at his side. 2 of his men flanked him, weapons drawn. "Impressive," Slade said, looking at Titan. "Maybe the dog is worth more than I thought." He raised the gun toward Evelyn. Titan turned. He didn't lunge. He didn't bark. He placed himself squarely between Slade and Nathan, legs planted wide, head low, shoulders locked. A growl rolled out of his chest. Deep, even, controlled. Not the panicked snarling of a frightened animal. This was the sound of a dog who knew exactly what he was protecting, and exactly what he was prepared to do. Slade's finger hovered over the trigger. He hesitated. The dog's calm was more unsettling than any fury he'd ever faced. Rage, he understood. Rage was predictable. This measured, unbreakable focus was something else entirely. Vincent's men moved in from behind. 2 guards flanked Slade's men, weapons leveled. Vincent himself stepped forward, unarmed, and looked Slade in the eye. "You lose," Vincent said. Slade's men dropped their weapons. Slade lowered the pistol. It was over in seconds. Not with an explosion, but with a surrender so quiet it barely made a sound. In the car ride home, Nathan sat in the back seat with Titan's head in his lap. The braided leash was still clipped to the dog's collar. Nathan held it with one hand. With the other, he reached across the seat and took Evelyn's hand. He didn't let go until they were through the estate gates. Vincent watched them in the rearview mirror. His son, his dog, and a woman he had hired to scrub floors. The woman who had just saved everything he had left in this world. He owed her a debt that no amount of money could name. Dominic Slade was arrested that night. Federal agents, the ones Vincent's lawyer had quietly contacted after the kidnapping, were waiting at the Warehouse District perimeter. Slade and his 2 men were taken into custody before they reached their vehicles. No shots fired, no negotiation, just handcuffs and silence. But the arrest opened a door no one expected. During the seizure of Slade's assets, federal investigators pulled financial records from a network of shell companies Slade had built over the previous decade. Buried in the records, layered under 3 holding companies and a defunct real estate trust, was a property transaction from 6 years ago, a commercial building in Asheville, North Carolina. The landlord had been laundering money through the building's lease agreements on Slade's behalf. When a federal audit started closing in, Slade needed the paper trail destroyed. The building that burned was Evelyn Carter's clinic. The fire that killed her husband was not electrical. It was arson, ordered by Dominic Slade, carried out by a man who was paid $4,000 and a bus ticket to disappear. The insurance denial, the irregularities in the policy that had bankrupted Evelyn, had been engineered. Slade's people had altered the documents before the claim was filed. They needed the fire to look like negligence, not crime. They needed Evelyn to lose everything quietly, without investigation. And she had. She had lost her clinic, her husband, her career, her identity. She had scrubbed floors for 6 years because a man she'd never met needed to hide his money. Vincent received the report in his office. He read it twice. Then he set it down on his desk and didn't speak for a long time. He had known Slade for over a decade. They had done business together. They had shared meals, exchanged favors, operated in the same world with the same rules. And those rules, his rules, had destroyed the life of the woman who had just saved his son. Gloria found him sitting in the dark an hour later. She turned on the lamp. His eyes were dry, but his face looked like it had aged 10 years. "She doesn't know yet," Gloria said. "I'll tell her myself," Vincent said. He told Evelyn the next morning in the garden. Nathan was at school. Titan lay between them on the grass. Vincent handed her the federal report, redacted in places, but clear enough. Evelyn read it without expression, page by page. When she finished, she set the papers on her knee and looked at the sky. "James went back in for the case files," she said. Her voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled taut. "He said he'd be 30 seconds. The ceiling came down in 20. Vincent said nothing. There was nothing adequate to say. "I spent 6 years thinking it was my fault," Evelyn said. "That I should have renewed the policy sooner. That I should have checked the wiring. That if I'd been more careful, he'd still be alive." She paused. "It was never the wiring." "No," Vincent said. "It wasn't." Evelyn looked at him. "You lived in the same world as the man who killed my husband." "Yes." "You operated by the same rules." Vincent met her eyes. He didn't flinch. "Yes, I did." The silence between them was heavy and honest. Titan shifted, pressing his body closer to Evelyn's leg. "I can't undo what Slade did," Vincent said. "But I can make sure the world knows what happened. And I can make sure you get back what was taken from you." 3 days later, Vincent held a press conference on the steps of the Asheville Federal Courthouse. It was the first time he had appeared publicly in connection with any legal matter. Reporters filled the steps. Cameras lined the sidewalk. He didn't speak long. He introduced Dr. Samuel Whitfield, who read a professional assessment of Evelyn's work with Titan, clinical terminology, behavioral data, measurable outcomes. Whitfield called it the most advanced behavioral rehabilitation I have witnessed in 30 years of veterinary practice. Then Vincent introduced Evelyn, not as his maid, not as his housekeeper, as Dr. Evelyn Carter, board-certified veterinary behaviorist, the woman who had rehabilitated an animal every expert had given up on, who had tracked and rescued a kidnapped child using training methods she developed herself, and who had done all of it while the people around her treated her as less than what she was. Evelyn stood at the microphone. She wore the same clothes she'd worn every day at the estate. Simple, clean, unadorned. She didn't perform. She didn't raise her voice. Everyone looked at Titan and saw a monster, she said. A liability. A problem to be sedated or destroyed. I looked at him and saw what I see in every creature that's been hurt. Someone who forgot how to trust. You don't fix that with chains. You don't fix it with shock collars or sedation or force. You fix it by sitting down, staying quiet, and proving, day after day, that you won't leave. That's not just how you train a dog. That's how you heal anything that's been broken. She paused. The courthouse steps were silent. My husband believed that. He believed every animal deserved someone who would stay. He went back into a burning building because he believed the work mattered more than the risk. Her voice held steady. The fire that killed him was not an accident. It was a crime. And today, for the first time in 6 years, that crime has a name. Gloria, watching the live stream from the estate kitchen, wiped her eyes with a dish towel. Marco stood beside her, jaw clenched, nodding. The security guards, men who had smirked at Evelyn on her first day, stood in the hallway, silent. Slade's trial moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, the arsonist's confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. Slade was convicted on charges of arson, conspiracy, kidnapping, and racketeering. His assets were seized, his network dismantled. His name became a cautionary footnote in federal court records. On the day of sentencing, Vincent transferred the deed to Evelyn's former clinic property into her name. Full ownership, no conditions, no strings. He handed her the document in his office. "This was always yours," he said. Evelyn held the paper and looked at it for a long time. Then she drove to Asheville alone. She stood in the charred shell of her old clinic, the walls still black, the roof open to the sky, weeds growing through the cracked foundation. Titan stood beside her, the braided leash hanging loose between them. She looked at the leash. She looked at the ruins. "We're going to build something here," she said. 6 months later, the Carter Animal Behavioral Center opened its doors. The building stood on the same plot of land where Evelyn's clinic had burned. New walls rose where the old ones had crumbled. Steel frame, glass windows, warm wood paneling along the intake corridor. The lobby was wide and clean, with natural light pouring through skylights Evelyn had insisted on. "Animals respond to light," she told the architect. So do people. The center specialized in cases no one else would take. Aggressive dogs marked for euthanasia. Traumatized rescues from fighting operations. Animals seized from hoarding situations. Emaciated, feral, terrified of human hands. Evelyn built a team of 4 behaviorists, 2 veterinary technicians, and a rotation of graduate students from the State University's Animal Science program. She trained every one of them the same way she had trained Titan. Patience first, silence second, trust last. The rehabilitation protocol she developed became known in veterinary circles as the Carter method. It was simple in principle and demanding in practice. No aversive tools, no dominant space corrections, no timeline. Each animal set its own pace. The behaviorist's job was to be present, be quiet, and be consistent. To prove, session by session, that not every human was a threat. The success rate was extraordinary. In the first 6 months, the center rehabilitated 31 animals. 28 were adopted into permanent homes. 2 became certified therapy dogs. 1, a German shepherd named Cole, who had been kept chained in a basement for 4 years, became the center's second ambassador, working alongside Titan in the public education program. Titan himself was the center's heart. He walked the corridors freely, greeting visitors with the calm, steady presence of an animal who had crossed from one life into another. Children who came on school field trips would sit on the lobby floor and Titan would lie down among them, resting his head on the nearest small lap. Parents watched with disbelief. Teachers took photographs. No one could reconcile the gentle giant in front of them with the dog that had sent 3 men to the hospital. Nathan volunteered every Saturday. He was 11 now, taller by 2 inches, and he talked. To the staff, to the animals, to anyone who would listen. He had developed a particular skill with the intake dogs, the ones who arrived shaking and snarling. He would sit on the floor of their enclosure with a book in his lap, reading aloud in a steady voice, the way Evelyn had taught him. Most of the dogs settled within the first session. "He has the gift," Evelyn told Vincent one afternoon, watching Nathan through the observation window. "The same thing that lets him connect with Titan. He doesn't try to control them. He just shows up." Nathan had told his tutor he wanted to be a veterinarian. He had started reading animal behavior textbooks on his own, heavy, dense books that Evelyn left on the center's shelves. He understood maybe a third of what he read. He didn't care. He read them the way he read adventure stories to Titan, not for mastery, but for the feeling of being close to something that mattered. Vincent had changed. The shift was not dramatic. He was still Vincent Hargrove, still guarded, still powerful, still a man whose name carried weight in rooms where weight was currency. But something in the architecture of his decisions had moved. He stepped back from the operations that ran on intimidation and control. He closed 2 businesses that he couldn't reconcile with the person he was trying to become. He funded the center, anonymously at first, then openly after a reporter connected the dots. He sat on the center's advisory board. He attended quarterly meetings in a conference room that smelled like dog treats and antiseptic. He wore the same suits he wore to every other meeting, but he took off his jacket when he arrived and rolled up his sleeves. It was a small thing. Evelyn noticed. Gloria Pearson had retired from the estate 3 months after the center opened. She told Vincent she was tired. The truth was more complicated. She had watched Evelyn rebuild a life from ashes, the same ashes Gloria had tried to sweep out the front door on Evelyn's first day. The guilt was quiet but persistent, and Gloria handled it the only way she knew how. She volunteered at the center 2 days a week, managing the front desk, scheduling intake appointments, and keeping the supply closet organized, with a precision that bordered on military. She and Evelyn never discussed the first day again. They didn't need to. The work said everything the words couldn't. The braided leather leash hung in a glass case in the center's lobby. Evelyn had mounted it herself, the same leash she had braided from tackroom scraps on her 5th night at the Hargrove estate. The leather had softened with use. The stitching at the loop showed wear from Nathan's grip. Below it, a small brass plaque read, "A leash should feel like a handshake, not a fist. Evelyn Carter." Visitors stopped in front of it every day. Some read the words quickly and moved on. Others stood for a while, turning the sentence over in their minds, recognizing something in it that went beyond dogs and leashes and training. Something about how any broken thing could be mended if someone was willing to hold on without squeezing. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, 6 months and 11 days after the center opened, a new dog arrived. A female Rottweiler, 3 years old, seized from a property outside Charlotte. She had been kept in a crate too small for her body for most of her life. Her muscles had atrophied. Her teeth were cracked from chewing the wire. She shook constantly, and when anyone approached, she lunged with a scream that sounded less like aggression and more like begging. The intake team stepped back. The vet tech hesitated at the enclosure door. Evelyn walked in alone. She sat on the concrete floor, 3 feet from the crate, and turned her body slightly to the side. She rested her hands open on her knees. She breathed. The Rottweiler screamed, then barked, then paced, then, after 9 minutes, lay down in the corner of the crate with her eyes locked on Evelyn's hands. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't speak. Nathan watched from the observation window, arms folded, a faint smile on his face. He had seen this before. He knew what came next. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, the dog would come to her. They always did. Behind the center, through the glass doors that led to the rear garden, Titan lay in a patch of afternoon sun. His eyes were half closed. His breathing was slow. Around him, 3 children from a local school sat in a loose circle, petting his ears, giggling when his tail thumped against the grass. The world had told Evelyn Carter she was nothing but a maid. A dog knew better. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One creature who sees what everyone else missed. If you believe the world needs more people like Evelyn, share this story. Drop a comment. What's one time someone surprised you with unexpected kindness? And subscribe, because every week we bring you stories of people who changed everything by simply refusing to walk away.
They called her a stray, handed her a bucket, and for 6 years, grief almost buried who she really was. But Evelyn didn't stay buried, and neither did the truth. This story taught me 3 things. First, patience is not weakness. Evelyn sat with a dog that terrorized everyone. No shock collars, no force, just presence. 4 nights later, that animal trusted her with his life. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is simply stay. Second, boundaries are not revenge. She looked a powerful man in the eye and said, "On my terms." Didn't beg, didn't yell, just refused to be less than what she was. That's not attitude, that's self-respect. Third, truth doesn't stay hidden. Slade burned her clinic, took her husband, destroyed everything. 6 years, Evelyn blamed herself, but the evidence was sitting in its own files the whole time. Real talk, have you ever lost something and convinced yourself it was your fault? Have you ever let someone's label become your identity? Evelyn scrubbed floors for 6 years, but the fire never burned away who she was. It just took the right moment for the world to see it. What's something you almost gave up on that turned out to be worth the wait? Drop it in the comments, like, subscribe, share this with someone still in their hard season. A leash should feel like a handshake, not a fist.